Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. We're glad to have you. If you are a first-time listener, glad you found us. If you are a returning listener or viewer, glad to have you back, and I've got some exciting news that's all because of you. Today, January 13th, 2021, through our hosting provider at Buzzsprout, great people, you're going to do podcasting. They let us know through an email that my podcast, just getting off the ground here, returning to the air, had cracked the top 10% of all the podcasts worldwide. Now that was exciting news, and it's all because of you. So I hope and pray that I can continue to get your attention and you can come back and find entertaining content, because there's a lot of choices out there for podcasts and shows. There's over 86,000 podcasts. Who knows how many YouTube channels? I think that's in the millions. So anyway, welcome aboard. Got some exciting things to share. We finally are fully syndicated on 23 different platforms out there. So from Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, you name it. So wherever you're looking for podcasts, we're there. The show is presented video on all of the major social media platforms, and one that got taken down, but one will be back. So we're excited to be there. So anyway, that's it for those. If you're listening or watching, please hit the subscribe button so you can get all the latest updates when we've got new items and new shows, new episodes. And then the last thing, for a little bit of house cleaning, I want to talk about our sponsor, our friends over at Wealth Management Group. Wealth Management Group, great people. They're not product pushers, so they don't push one particular thing or another. They sit down with you and they look at your assets and your goals and your plans, and they'll come up with programs and strategies that will help you meet your financial goals. Great people, love to work with them. Their website is wealthmanagement.estate. That's wealthmanagement.estate. All right, so now we got all that out of the way. I generally won't leave that long of an intro because we had new news to share today with hitting the top 10%, but that's fun. So today I have a cool story. It happened about 18 years ago. I don't exactly remember, but I do know it was in January. So I had a web development company, and we were building websites for all kinds of people. And I had this developer named Chris Brainerd, great guy. Like a lot of technical types and creative technical types, very, very smart guy, but he was into all kinds of things that weren't exactly mainstream. Now, Chris didn't live in Boulder, but not far from Boulder, and he believed in metaphysical stuff, crystals. He was into Native American culture and those stuff. He was one of those guys who just wasn't mainstream. Now, let's just put it that way. Wonderful human being, always compassionate. But while Chris worked for me, he was always bugging me to go to a sweat lodge. And I'd be like, nah, that's not my thing, a sweat lodge. And he'd bring it into the conversation all the time. Well, one day I fell into a trap. You know how this works. Someone asks you, oh, do you have anything going on? And I was stupid enough to say no, because I was just paying attention to other things. And I had forgotten the fact that he had invited me so many times. So I said no. And he's like, oh, well, then next Friday you can come to the sweat lodge with me. And I didn't want to break his heart, and I had turned him down so many times, and I kind of have an adventure spirit to me, so I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. So I'm going to do it. So he talked to me, and he said, well, listen, what they want people to do is to be part of this thing. Your contribution is to bring some firewood. Now, I was a person who had a wood-burning stove in my house and heated part of my house with that, and so I had a ton of wood. So it was no big deal to load up, like a half a pickup load of wood and take it over to this house. Now, I was expecting when Chris was telling me about this that it was a Oglala Sioux, Indian Oglala Sioux sweat lodge, that I would be out on the plains somewhere rural or up in the mountains. But actually not. It was in the metropolitan area. Right here in Westminster was the town we had it in. So I was kind of dumbfounded because it really wasn't that far from my home, maybe 5 miles. So anyway, it was a Friday night. We would get over there, 7 o'clock, and absolutely in that backyard, there was a igloo-shaped wigwam tent. And it was very well made, but you could tell that the poles were not something that were, and the canvas was not something they bought. It had wood branches that had been bent like this, and it was built. So in essence, it was very rustic and very authentic, that it was going to be as a Sioux Indian sweat lodge. So they asked us to bring a swimsuit to wear. That was the attire. You needed a towel, so that way you could, come out and wipe off and get back in your clothes and stuff. So we get there, and the first aspect of the ritual was we get around this fire ring. Now, this was a really neat, and it was a cool idea. They had a fire ring that was dug down into the ground. And then at the level of the top of the fire ring was like a walking area, and then the bench, and then you sat there. So you sat ground level, so your behind would be ground level. Your feet would be down on the level near the fire, and the fire was down and below. And there was around 25 people or so. So the first part of the ritual is that we gathered around the outside of the ring, and we stood there and held hands, and basically everybody got to introduce themselves. And the leader of this, and forgive me, I don't remember the guy's name, but he was a descendant of Sioux, Ogallala Sioux. And it wasn't like he was a white guy that looked like an Indian. He was an Indian as far as his color and makeup and stuff. So anyway, he says this little prayer, and it's in Sioux, and I don't understand this. I think Chris might understand some of it. So we stood there holding hands and I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. It's part of the ritual. Then the next part of the ritual, which I was surprised a little bit, was we're going to smoke some peyote. Well, I don't smoke peyote. I've never been a marijuana user in my whole life. And even though, and this was before it was illegal, it was legal in Colorado. So this was illegal days. And I didn't care. No judgment here. You've been around parties and beer parties and stuff like that. Who cares? So they pass around these big 3 joints, and people are taking hits off of it, and some of them are taking multiple hits and stuff. And I was just thinking to myself, I really want to be clear and lucid here when I experience this. So absolutely no, I'm not going to do that. So after the peyote went around a few times, everybody got all the hits they wanted and stuff. We went they had a garage, and it had half been cordoned off for the men and women. So they had these little cubby holes to put your clothes in. So we changed into our swimsuits and came back out. And we didn't take towels. So we just, you came back out. So when you got back out there, we started to enter the lodge. Now, they opened up the lodge door, and it literally was like on a hinge, and it was like a flap that you see when they show in the movies the teepees. It was like a flap that folded back, and it had a stick on it and stuff. So it was like a door. So they opened that up, and we get inside, and they put us around the outside of the wigwam in a circle. And then once that was full, then they put a second round inside of us. So we were 2 deep from the fire pit and around the whole outside circle. Now, Chris had warned me about being a first-time sweat lodge participant, that it's going to be hot. You're going to be really uncomfortable. You might get claustrophobic. Hang in there. Now, for those who might be watching on video, he said we were sitting on our rear ends with our legs folded, what they call Indian style, but that would be politically incorrect today. But we were sitting on our legs, and then if you got really too hot, you'd put your hands down in front of you, so you'd kind of be on all fours, tip your head down and try to catch air up underneath. All right, so that's the technique. So we get all in there, and the Ogallala Sioux leader, I don't want to call him chief, I don't want to be disrespectful, but anyway, he says some sort of prayer and talked about what was to be expected. And then he said another prayer, and they brought in the rocks. Now, they had a grain shovel. So if any of you have been around a grain shovel, it's this really wide shovel. And they brought in rocks that were about the size of a basketball. And they had been in the fire outside in the fire ring. And they were, some as big as a basketball, some about a volleyball, some down to about a oversized softball. But those are the size of rocks. And they kept bringing these shovel loads of them in. And they were red hot. I mean, these things were glowing. So they set them into the fire pit in the center of the wigwam. Then they brought in a bucket of water and just started pouring it over with a cup, just pouring it over the rocks. And the steam took off. holy cow, it got hot fast. Now, it was about maybe 25 degrees outside. I mean, it was not a warm day, but inside that tent, oh my goodness, it lit up the steam. And there was a person sitting next to the leader who was literally just pouring a little bit of water here and there. So he was the steam moderator for nothing else. So that's when the fun began. It started to get hot, and I mean really hot. And now, to add to this level of discomfort, one of the gentlemen in the outside of the ring started beating on a drum. And it was, he had these big bongos and he was beating on a drum. And it was literally just boom, 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 boom. And it wasn't really like he was playing a musical tune. He was just boom, 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 boom. So he's pounding the drum. And within seconds after him starting the drum, they start chanting. Now, of course, I didn't study any Sioux Indian language books before. The internet was there. I didn't Google anything. I had nothing to prepare me for what was about to happen. So they start chanting. And it literally, in my mind, it made no sense. I had no idea. So there we had the drums. Boom, 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 boom. And then we had chanting on top of that. Ay, 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 ay. And it was ear-splitting because about half the people in there had been there before, and they were chanting. And they knew the cadence and all this stuff. And so the sweat is starting just to roll off my head. The drumming is just this loud, because we're in a very small place in this sweat lodge. And then to top it off, the chanting. Ay, 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 ay. I can't tell you how miserable I was. I was absolutely so uncomfortable. And they just kept pouring water with the cup on the rocks. The steam got more and more intense. And I'm just, at this point in time, just swimming in sweat, just swimming in it. I was so hot, and I was getting to the point where I was claustrophobic. And I'm not a person who gets claustrophobic very often or very easy, but I was getting claustrophobic because there were at least 10 people between me and the door. There was a group everywhere. There was Chris on my right-hand side, another guy on my left-hand side. There was a woman to about 45-degree angle from me, and this other guy about 45-degree angle. And it was unmiserable. So I thought I would try to get some relief. So I got up on my hands and knees, and it wasn't helping. It just wasn't helping. And the pounding of the drums was so loud, and the chanting, it just, I can't even explain the nonsense. It was just, I was going out of my mind. So with a little ingenuity, I stuck my hand, because I was on the outside ring, out underneath the edge of the wigwam, the canvas. And I basically pried it up a little bit and dug, and I got a little bit of air so it would come in. So I kind of turn around and tuck my nose down in there, and I'm trying to get air. But no matter what, it just wasn't enough. It was so hot. Now, I know I was supposed to be having this metaphysical, get in touch with the universe, spiritual thing. But all I could think about was how hot I was, how much I couldn't breathe, how insufferable this was, and the damn drumming and chanting. Boom, 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 boom. Hi, 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 boom, boom. It was unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. And now I have no idea, because they asked us to take our watches off because they didn't want you clock watching, how long this went on. Now, most people have a good idea of, sense of time. But I was so uncomfortable. I was sweating so bad, and the chanting and the drumming, I had no idea how long this lasted. Well, finally, I turned back around because the cold wasn't working, and I get up on my all fours and stuff. And there were people who actually had worn T-shirts and stuff in. Well, the lady that was a 45 degree next to me had worn a shirt in. Well, she took it off, and then she turned around and basically was laying her head almost with my feet, and she had taken her shirt off, and she was bare on top. So there's this woman there with her breasts hanging out and the chanting going on. And normally, being a man, you'd be like, whoa, this is cool, a naked lady. There was nothing. All I could think about is, get me out of here. Get me out of here. I just can't take it anymore. Boom, 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 boom. Hi. Now, I'm sorry, I probably missed the metaphysical side of this. I know I missed every ounce of opportunity to connect my soul to the universe, but all I could think about was all miserable. So finally, like I said, I have no idea. The drumming stopped, and they opened up the flap door, and a rush of cold air went in. And it felt so good, but I was still miserably hot. And all I wanted to do was basically lurch and leap towards the door. It was just, get me out of here. So people crawled out, excuse me, and we got out. Now, the most memorable part of the entire experience was standing out there in my swimsuit, dripping with sweat. And I mean, I am pretty sure I had sweated from every pore in my body. I am absolutely sure I sweated from every pore in my body. And I can remember standing out there, the steam rolling off of me, but how alive I felt and how clear my head was, because literally the drumming and the chanting and the sweat had wiped away any opportunity for any other earthly thought to be in my mind. It was just that there. So I stood there. I wasn't even cold. It just felt good to be out of that sweat lodge, have no more drumming, boom, 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 I mean, be out of the whole thing. So I stood out there, and Chris came out, and he came over to me, and he's laughing. He's laughing at me. Oh, did you enjoy it? And I'm like, and because I basically probably had a look of dread on my face, and he's like, how was it? And he goes, didn't you connect with the spirit and all this stuff? And I'm like, that was the most miserable experience of my life. I just, so yeah, I probably missed every ounce of the intended energy of that entire experience. But the only thing I can remember was how happy I was to be getting dressed, getting into my pickup, and going home to a temperature-controlled house. So that's my story of the Sweat Lodge. A lot of people have bucket list items. That ain't on it. One and done. Never going to do that again. So if someone approaches you, now just be careful what you agree to do, but take in mind my story about my Ogallala Sioux Sweat Lodge. Until next time, take care.